And so my name is Shadille Estepan. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I'm the communications and creative manager for Born This Way Foundation. And we're dedicated to, our mission is to support youth mental health and work with young people to build a kinder and braver world. It's an absolute honor to be speaking with the Psi Chi community, with you all today, in this session focused on mental health and wellness. And we know that you all study this every day and learn how to support others, but I'm excited to have a conversation about the uh, sort of what we're facing today, introduce some general concepts on how to create supportive communities within this professional field, and discuss how we can share resources that you can use to support yourselves and each other. And so to help kick us off this conversation, I'd love for our panelists, Maria and Isabel, to introduce themselves, share their pronouns, and tell us what brings them here today. And we'll start with Maria.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm sure many more people will be joining us in a little bit. My pronouns, as Shadille was saying, are she, her, and ella also. I live in Guatemala right now, so I'm joining from from Central America. I'm a licensed psychologist. I've been practicing for almost 3 years now, and my focus is always youth, teenagers, LGBTQIA plus community. So I'm very thrilled and I'm very excited to be sharing with you about how we can care for each other, how we can be kind, and how can we just be there for one another, and share experiences in this panel. So I'm very happy to be participating. And now I'll pass the word to Isabel.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Isabel Santos. I'm also super excited to be here today. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior at Hope College, which is in Michigan, and I'm studying psychology and Spanish. I plan to pursue a PhD in clinical or school psychology and someday teach at the university level. Over the past year and a half, I have contributed to 4 research projects. So I'm passionate about positive psychology and psychophysiological connections. And so I'm proposing my own research project right now on the physiological implications of virtue-value alignment. So that's super exciting. And I'm working as a special education paraprofessional this summer before I kickstart my research proposal in the fall once I go back to school. So after working at that Center for Autism as a paraprofessional, I've decided that I would love to work with children in the future. So I'm also passionate about promoting youth mental health.
Wow, thank you both so much for sharing about your specific focus within this field, and also I think it's really beautiful to note that both of you are on different sides, so to speak, of this field. You're Isabel, you're studying this, you're discovering this, like you're in this beautiful discovery phase, it sounds, where you're learning what your passions are within this field and working with young people, and really presenting your own thesis and what that looks like. And then Marines, you have many years of experience in working in the field, and we're excited to have in this room, this virtual room, the same, and everyone in between, folks who are just graduating, some of us who are maybe thinking about entering the field. And I think there's a lot to say about how we're able to convene and talk about this across all of these different milestones. And I'd love to talk about sort of laying the groundwork and the foundation, and really understanding where we're coming from and why this conversation is needed. And so in hearing from you both, and also just from the team at Psi Chi, I've learned that it's also very important to talk about stress within this field. You work with individuals and to support young people and adults alike, but the role itself as professionals who work with people in this space I would love to learn a little bit about what your experiences are like, and what are the common stressors that you are identifying in each of your spaces. And feel free to jump in. I think we have enough time for both of you to share your thoughts on that.
Isabel, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Well, the first thing I think of, last year, I was an intern at a mental health crisis center in Michigan. So it's a short-term facility for individuals with acute mental illness. It was about, the average length of stay was about 3 days. So this crisis center served as a sort of alternative for psychiatric hospitalization, and as a place for those who have been recently discharged to go sort of transition in between before they return to independent living. So stress was for sure. I was surrounded by crisis. So honestly, the hardest part for me was like building those connections over the 3 days and then having a consumer leave and not knowing what happened to them or what's going on in their lives now. But I had about a 30-minute commute home, so that was really helpful to like de-stress and unwind and relax. On a more positive note, what was really fascinating to me about this was it was like a voluntary crisis center. So there was this like sizable element of hope, which I didn't initially expect because everyone that I met was choosing to be there. So everyone had the choice to leave whenever they wanted, and yet they stayed. So it was, what was so beautiful to me was how each person chose to engage in their own journey to recovery and increased mental health stability. So despite being surrounded by crisis, I was actually filled with quite a bit of hope.
I think on the same like topic that Isabel was sharing, for me already being in like the practice context, several of the stressors, and I don't know if any of the people here are interested in clinical psychology, but if you are, and even if you're not, I think part of what we do as mental health professionals is actually be there for other people. And that tends to get a little bit tiring when you're receiving like constantly this feedback from other people. Like I always like to call it like we as mental health professionals have this sort of like vibe that people tend to come to us for when they're in trouble, for when they're feeling bad. So we tend to receive all of these things, and we need to be very careful of how we're taking care of ourselves, because it tends to get very, very tiring at some point. For example, Isabel was mentioning, okay, it was voluntary. And it's okay if it's voluntary, but how are we taking care of ourselves first to be able to take care of other people? And as mental health professionals, we take care not only of our clients or our patients' bodies, but also their minds, their emotions, their feelings. So we need to really set this like thin line and have it very clear in our minds about, okay, I'm helping, but I'm like sort of a river and I can run out of water as a river, and I have to be filling myself up constantly. Because some of the stressors might be, for example, okay, I have a very serious case, or I don't know what to choose as my postgraduate career, for example. So it's not only at a practice level, but how I want to be a mental health professional and how I want to help others while taking care of myself. So I think that's one of the main stressors that we're all going to experience independently of which field we choose, or where we choose to go. So taking care of ourselves, always being and having that in mind, so that we can be there for each other.
Thank you both so much. I'm feeling very hopeful, as Isabel shared. In hearing these ways in which you're finding the opportunity to create these boundaries, and I'm curious for everyone else who's on, if you can share in the chat what brings you hope. What are some ways that so what brings you hope, or what are some ways that you set boundaries? And Marines, I'd love to stick with you and maybe talk a little further about what does it look like to create those boundaries. And so I think oftentimes we are told, whether we're in this field or not, to set these boundaries, but not exactly equipped with the knowledge on how to do it. And like you said, I think the scenarios change for everyone, but what has that looked like for you, and what are some tips that you would recommend?
Okay. Also, something that I would like to mention before answering your question, Shadille, is how also another stressor is how lonely this profession gets to become at some point, because we're just like working ourselves out with patients, with clients, with other people, even doing research projects. It tends to get very lonely sometimes. So I think setting these boundaries is not only for ourselves but also with others. I always like to differentiate those two, because I think society or professionals tend to tell us, okay, set boundaries towards the outside with other people, so that they don't rob you of your energy. But we also have to learn how to set like these boundaries for ourselves. So for me, it's always important to just have this daily check-ins with ourselves and have this sort of like thermometer of, okay, how am I feeling today? Like from 0 to 10, how am I feeling today? And then decide based on how I'm feeling, naming my emotion, and just giving me that mental health space during the day, and see, okay, this is what I can give today. This is what I can receive today. This is what I can do. And then also questioning the relationships I'm having, the work relationships I'm having, the friend relationships I'm having. Are they really bringing me something good? Am I giving too much? Am I receiving less than what I'm giving? And just setting these boundaries to protect my own energy, to protect my own mental health, so that I can be this hope and I can bring this hope to other people. So I think it's a simultaneous work between how do I check in on with myself and how am I feeling so that I can give, and also what am I receiving and how am I interacting in these relationships. Because boundaries are not something strict, are not something imperative, but they have to come from a place of love, of caring and compassion.
That's a wonderful sentiment. Thank you so much, Marinés. And I think even those of us who are not showing our screen are just like, yes, yes, like we hear you, and that definitely resonates with me personally. And Isabel, I'm curious about what that looks like and how it plays out as a student. So how do we, in this academic setting where we are constantly setting new goals, reaching new milestones, and like looking ahead all the time, how do you create that boundary within yourself and like say, okay, I need a break? Or how do you what does that look like for you?
Yeah, great question. I first of all, just in the work itself, checking things off of a to-do list or whatever, it feels like that list is just never ending. And I had a professor tell me to, how did she put it? She said pretty much the list will never end, and that you have to find a way to like take breaks during that list and find joy in the pursuit of the work that you're doing. So for me, like my happiness isn't going to come when I like eventually hopefully get a PhD, but now as I'm doing in this discovery phase, like you said. And as far as types of breaks and things to set boundaries, I said I had that 30-minute commute home, and that is not like a self-imposed boundary, but that was time that I was able to use to de-stress. And so I think even for like a very busy student who maybe only has that like 30-minute drive from like something to the next thing, every moment can be used. You don't need to be like blasting your music on the drive or anything. You can just use that time to reflect or clear your mind or whatever you would like to do. And I would like to add, like Marinés was saying about our bodies and minds, and how she takes care of not only people's bodies but emotions and feelings. It has to be the same for ourselves, otherwise we will be more vulnerable to the work stress. And I said my research is psychophysiological, and so it is pretty well known that mental and physical health are closely related. So we must take care of both because our bodies affect our mental health symptoms, and things like anxiety and stress and depression can affect our bodies as well.
And I'm like genuinely curious to hear more about the physiological responses of stressors and how we can best manage them. But I think that that's something that is like very, of course, there's like the very clinical way to approach it. But for those of you who study this, like know this, please know that I'm not a mental health professional. So I have like a genuine question about absolutely everything that you're sharing, but it may be reiterative information for a lot of folks who are on. So instead of asking, sort of like what are some of those physiological responses, I'd love to hear from everyone. What are some of the ways you fill your own cup? Like, I would really love to see the chat like flooded with ways that you care for yourself. What does that look like? I think it's just we know that there's an inextricable link between kindness to yourself and your mental health. And while the media industry can often misuse or overuse the word self-care to mean these like sort of external things that we do for and to ourselves to help us reach said happiness. I think what Isabel shared about making every moment an opportunity to find joy and to like ground yourself, be it driving, be it that moment like in between classes, if you have 10 minutes to take a breather, like stretch, touch your toes, doing different things like that, I think could be really helpful. And it sounds like, I'm just going to open up the chat. It looks like many of you are sharing that. I love that. Just walking your dog, taking time for yourself and others, prayer, yes. And Elizabeth, I try to make time every day to check in with myself through meditation. These are such powerful notes, and I'm guilty of saying that like these are great, and then finding a day where I have just so much work I don't have time to do any of them. So one thing I've started practicing, and like with your nods or thumbs up in the chat or something, let me know if this is something you think would be helpful to you, but I schedule it. So if I put it on my calendar in the middle of the day, whether it's 15 minutes of a like breath work and I link the YouTube video, or in the afternoon, like a moment to just like sit at a park. If I know I'm gonna walk home from one part of the city to another, I'll do that. And so we've all got our ways, but equipping ourselves before we get to a point where we feel burnt out is the really the key there. And anyone who's on, I feel like there's such a close group here that if you want to unmute yourselves and share a little bit about what we're talking, what we're saying and how it relates to you or what it means to you, how it looks in your life, feel free to share it. Let us know and just unmute yourselves and feel free to jump in. This is a conversation between all of us. We love this. And so on that note, and while folks think about perhaps what they'd like to jump in on, I want to share that the next thing I want to ask about is being there for other people. So what does that look like? I know that your jobs literally mean that you are there for other people, but being there for each other as professionals in this field. I know that Psi Chi is a community and that you can lean on each other for support. And I really hope that that's something that you feel today on this panel and always. And so I'm very curious about what it looks like for a mental health professional to support a fellow mental health professional or someone who's studying. And so Marines, from your perspective as someone who's been practicing for quite some time, and Isabel, from your perspective as a student, like what did that look like in each of your spaces?
Okay, for me, I would like to just maybe like modify what you're saying, and instead of just like being there, it's like being present with someone else, because it's just being with one another. It's being present in that moment with someone else, and part of that is how we're listening to each other, and not just listening to answer or to reply immediately. It's being there, present in the moment, being mindful with the other person. So independently, if it's a client, if it's a patient, if it's a colleague, if it's another person, it's just being there and listening to what the other person is saying, trying to be active in your listening and not changing the subject, not trying to solve, because I think we as mental health professionals, we are literally taught to solve other people's problems. Like, that's what they teach us, to always have a technique, to always have an answer, to always know what to say. I've had experiences in the clinic that people just ask, or they expect, for example, my approval, or that I solve something for them. Something that I always say in the clinic is, I'm not going to solve these problems for you. I'm going to be this light that's going to guide you through this, like, forest that's maybe a little bit dark right now, but I'm just going to guide you. And that's the way I am. And that's how I am present with my clients, with my patients, and with my colleagues. So it's not about solving other people's lives. It's not about always giving out advice. It's not about always having the right option, because sometimes just being there, present, without talking, without giving back, and just sitting there and being mindful of, okay, I'm here for you. You can talk to me. I'm listening. That tends to be, and it tends to be a lot more therapeutic than me bringing them 1,000 techniques of breath work, mindfulness, grounding techniques. Sometimes it's more important just to be there, listen, try to understand the other person's perspective, and not feel like we always have to have the right answer or give an advice back. So I think that's what it means to me. Just be present, being there, and listening actively to the other person.
It looks like Vinita wants to add. Vinita, thank you so much. Welcome to the conversation. If you want to share, reshare your name, your pronouns, and then jump in. Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Is it just me? Can everyone hear Vinita? No, we're unable to hear you. It shows that you're unmuted, but for some reason, we may not be able to hear you. Maybe it's something to do with permissions on your computer, which typically exists in the URL bar at the very top on the right-hand side. There's often some type of icon that is either a video or a photo. Okay, now it says you turned your audio off. Oh, we can't hear you. No. Please excuse the beeping in my background. I'm not sure if that's coming through, but that is New York City. It's like literal construction happening in front of me.
I
but
think
while
to add something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank
Yeah.
you. While Benita gets the audio, Isabel, please take it away.
Yeah. Well, I could just say something quick, but because Marina's pretty much covered everything I was thinking and what I would do. But many of my mentors and role models have been mental health professionals, and the biggest things are just listening, coming from that non-judgmental space and validating. And then I have also had very extremely unhelpful mental health professionals in my life. I've had a therapist who told me I didn't. Oh, hi, Benita. A therapist who told me I didn't have too much to talk about, wanted to end sessions early. And so in that time of need, I relied on this therapist to validate my feelings and listen to me, but had almost the opposite experience. So, and validation doesn't mean agreeing with someone's subjective reality, but just giving that person the space for their emotional state to exist. So validation, at least for me, has opened the door to some self-kindness and building stronger connections with others. So yeah, feeling that our emotions are valid can help us avoid that like shame, self-blame, and yeah, Benita, if you wanted to add to that, go for it.
Sure. Sorry about that. I'm sorry I'm late, everyone. My name is Benita. My pronouns are she and her. And I was actually late because I was helping someone through a mental health crisis just now. That's the thing about this kind of work. I'm very passionate about it, but at the same time, it's unpredictable how things go. And when there is a safety risk, I can't leave someone. So that's just, so I apologize. But what I wanted to add to what was discussed before is that I feel like in today's society, even though we've moved to more virtual means, which makes things accessible, obviously we couldn't be gathered here today without the internet and without a virtual platform. But at the same time, I think what's happened is that a lot of our communication skills are really lacking, because you could be in the same room with someone, and I do a lot of couples work as well, but people could be texting to each other, or their mind could be somewhere else, and they could be on the internet, and they could have a cell phone on, and lots of technology. But I feel like even though we have more communication tools, the quality of communication is really lacking. And what I mean by that is self-awareness, and also being observant about what's going on with people. Because if we really want to support others, we have to be present with that person. And I don't just mean physical presence, I mean really connecting with someone and noticing those cues. Because sometimes people don't come out and say, hey, I'm feeling, I have like suicidal thoughts. Hey, I'm feeling depressed. People don't just come out and say that, but you have to sort of observe certain things, and things that you've noticed that may be different from their baseline or what you're used to them being like. And if you don't notice those things, it's hard to objectively point that out to that person and say, you know what, I've noticed that in the past few weeks, and trying to be very careful, because you don't want to be judgmental, but definitely making a point that, I've noticed that you've been a bit distant. Is everything okay? And that is a really, really important skill to be able to foster. And also, of course, our nonverbal communication. Again, we're fortunate right now. We have a virtual platform. You can see my hands and all of that. But sometimes you can't see people's nonverbal communication. And it's actually scary, because a lot of times people don't even know themselves how risky they're feeling until it's too late sometimes. So I just think that these are good skills for all of us to learn if we really want to help others, including ourselves, is to just be more mindful, more aware. And I sort of agree with everyone who's spoken so far, is to be present. But when we're saying present, there needs to be skills in terms of what presence means.
Thank you so much. And I agree. I think there are the skills that you learn as professionals on how to help other people, and then there's these more, I would say, broad skills on how to recognize if someone's experiencing mental health distress, even someone in your own field. I think it looks different for everyone, but the same way that there are common mental health symptoms for the everyday person that doesn't exactly study or is in this field of mental health support, there exists these like commonalities in how someone is typically facing challenges in this field. And so recognizing what that looks like in your own space, and learning how to help one another preventatively. It sounds that what you're saying is really like building that toolbox, so to speak, is the step. And I'm excited, just as we round out this conversation, to share about Born This Way Foundation's Be There certificate. And so Born This Way Foundation and our partners at Jack.org, Jack.org created the Be There certificate in partnership with Born This Way Foundation. And essentially, the Be There certificate is a free, self-paced learning experience, designed to increase mental health literacy and provide you with the knowledge, skills, and in turn, the confidence needed to safely support someone in your life who may be struggling with their mental health. And what it really does is provide a framework on how to lead into these seemingly uncomfortable conversations. Even as folks who practice this and do this every day, it can be a challenge to reach out to a peer in the same field and offer support. And so learning what that looks like through a course like this, and then understanding how it applies to your specific profession or experiences, can be a really great step forward in learning how you can support someone. And so the Be There certificate is available in French, English, and Spanish, and anyone in any country can take this tool that speaks those languages. We're crossing our fingers and not crossing our fingers, putting our hands to work virtually to make sure that it is available in as many languages as possible. But for now, we've got English, French, and Spanish. And once you create a free, it's like totally free. Like, we're really not asking for anything. What we really want is to put this very helpful tool in the hands of every single person that we possibly can. And so we encourage you to learn about the Be There certificate, learn about Born This Way Foundation. And I'll also, I see so many of you like nodding and like engaging in the chat. If you have any questions about Born This Way Foundation's work, if you're curious about our programs, I am more than happy to share my personal email. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to field them my way, and I'd be happy to share more. I think that where there's a need and a group of people like you all here today that are really helping to fill this big, deep need in this world of supporting the people in each of your respective communities, like that is the work that Born This Way Foundation is hoping to do with you. And so please reach out to us. Please learn more about the Be There certificate. And if there's anything else anyone would like to share, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will round out the conversation with the sounds of sirens. Speaking of stress,
I just wanted to say the Be There certificate program is fantastic. I took the course myself online, and I really like that there were so many scenarios that you can apply the skills. So it's not just something that is, you just memorize, these are the rules and this is how you go. It's really like, it's very multicultural. It's very open to looking at situations, different types of situations that could possibly come up. And it's very culturally nuanced, which I really appreciate. I just thought the whole format was done very, very well. And you're able to take the modules as many times as you like. Once you start that account, you're able to log in. And since I've taken it myself and I really enjoyed the workshop, it's similar so I'm in Canada, I'm Canadian. So we have something called mental health first aid. And it's very similar to that. I can't emphasize enough. I think all of us need to be literate in mental health, because we all have something. We all have a mind, and it's very fragile. It's very, very fragile. One thing that I've learned from the past 2 years since COVID began is that mental health is very, very fragile. And, it just takes a little bit of stress or a little bit of not feeling balanced to push us over the edge. Before this point, unfortunately, there was, and I still think now, there's still a lot of shame and stigma talking about mental health, but I think it is improving. And by having more literacy and by kind of telling more people about this certificate program, you can really, really help to alleviate that. Right? We can all play a role if we just really promote the certificate and we have these conversations about mental health. And I think that in every community, whether it's virtual or in person, I think more conversations need to be had, because we're all vulnerable.
that is an excellent point. I feel like the world needs.
Sorry, Shadille. I think Carlos was wanting to talk since like 5 minutes ago.
Hey! Oh, Carlos, yes. Thank you, Marines.
It's like,
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, my name is Carlos. My pronouns are he, him. I'm not exactly sure how much what I have to share enriches the conversation. I've seen people speaking from different perspectives, like understanding psychology, mostly, but not only, as a body of knowledge that puts together intrapsychological stuff and also physiological, I've heard, variables, which is, of course, the principal, yes, like the main factors that we include within the psychological field. Like we understand that we're talking about cognition and feelings and emotions and perspectives and their connection with the way our body responds to different factors like stressors. But since I'm coming from a different perspective, I'm a environmental psychologist. I'm currently working in a project with special education. I would like to kind of put the focus on certain environmental components since COVID began everywhere, of course. There's been like an increasing sense of danger that, of course, affects our well-being, our psychological well-being, our physical well-being. And what I have been working with kids, especially with kids with autism and Down syndrome, is basically working with how to connect with your environment. So what has helped me keep my well-being in check, my mental health in check, is working with environmental factors. For example, integrating different routines that will help me and my kids keep things clean, hygienic, and everything that we need to allow our well-being to be maintained. Okay, of course. So I'm not sure if this makes much sense to you, but I feel like sometimes environmental components are ignored. We think of psychologists as mainly intrapsychological stuff, feelings, emotions, cognitions, perspectives, and how you cope with dangerous situations, hazardous situations. But in fact, what has helped me keep my mental health in check is being in positive environments, which is actually
Yeah.
the project I'm working with. Positive environments, which means keeping your environment positive, not only at a cultural level, of course, but physical level, introducing physical components that will help you be feel safe, feel protected in your own workplace environment, and that obviously helps you increase your perspective of protection and safety and everything else. Not sure if this helps, if this
Yeah.
enriches anything at all, but
It it
I just wanted
truly
to hear that.
It truly does, and we're so grateful, Carlos. Thank you for sharing that factor. It's like it really, I think, provides even a bigger picture, a more holistic picture of everything that we're talking about. And Vita, I know you've raised your hand. We're currently on time at time for the conversation, but I did want to turn it over to you if you'd like to close us off with your remarks. I wouldn't want to cut you off, but just stating that we have about 30 more seconds.
Sure. No, I just want to support what Carlos said. And I think definitely it's
Yeah.
very important that it's always nature and nurture. It's not nature versus nurture. There's always an interaction of both. And it's important to have a sociological analysis as well as a psychological analysis, that our brain functions in an environment and we are the environment. by us supporting other people, relationships and community supports and all of that, those things can be protective factors that can actually mitigate the onset and trajectory of mental health problems. So thank you so much. I think it's a great way to actually end, is that we are important. We play a huge role in protecting not only our own mental health, but the mental health of others.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, I feel as though I could talk for hours with this group, just really understanding each of your unique perspectives. But unfortunately, we are at time, and I am beyond grateful for Psi Chi's invitation to speak with all of you and to be in conversation with such bright minds. And I cannot wait until the next one. I feel like this is something that if it was a check-in every month where we talked about how we're caring for each other in this field, like what that looks like, please count me in. And so thank you all again, Marinés, Isabel, Benita, and everyone else who joined this conversation. We are so grateful for you, and we hope that you have an amazing rest of your day. And we'll talk very soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.